The reporters approached the husband and said, "How do you feel about the election?" He said, "I regret that I have only one life to give to my country."
I can hear Ed saying that.
Yeah. That's right. The title, Quo Vadis America. I'm giving this title, writing it down, for the sake of only 3 of you and the entire audience in the United States. Only 3. For the 3 of you who do not know Latin. Quo Vadis America. If you have ever been to Rome, you may have visited a chapel just outside of Rome. It was erected over a spot where, according to legend, Peter was in flight from persecution in Rome. On the road, he saw a vision of the Lord approaching. And Peter said to him, "Quo vadis, Domine?" "Where are you going, Lord?" The Lord said, "I'm going to Rome to be crucified." In other words, Peter, that's where you should be. Well, we've chosen that title instead of Quo Vadis Domine, Quo Vadis America. America, where are you going? Where are we going in this day and age? You know, one of the most unused words that we have in our vocabulary is the word patriotism. Hardly ever hear it anymore. Patriotism is a virtue that was allied to the old virtue of the Greeks and Latin called pietas. Pietas meant love of God, love of neighbor, love of country. And when one goes out, all go out. We no longer have love of God. We have a love of, no longer have love of country. We're going to investigate in a particular way today the problem of revolution. We start our country with the revolution. Revolution is in the air today. As a matter of fact, the revolutionists of our day are all arguing and contending that when we started that way, therefore we should continue it. So, let us now investigate this question. Namely, we do live in America in a revolutionary tradition, certainly. But the question is, what kind of a revolution should we have? What kind of a revolution? There are 2 kinds. One, the kind we started with, the other, the kind we have today. What was the kind we started with? Well, I can tell you the story of an old soldier who had fought at Concord. And someone said to him in his old days, "Why did you go to Concord on that April day? You suffered great oppression, didn't you?" No, Colonel Preston said, "No, I wasn't conscious of any great oppression from a foreign power." "Well, then, it's because you were against the Stamp Act." "Well, I never saw any of the stamps. I think the General Bernard kept met some of them in Castle William, but I never saw them. I certainly didn't fight on account of Stamp Act. Well, then you revolted on account of the tea tax. I never drank a cup of tea in my life. I wasn't interested in the tax. Well, then you must have been reading Harrington, Sidney, and Locke. Never read them. All I ever read was the Bible, Watts hymns, and the catechism. Well, then, why did you go to Congo? He said, for one reason. In order that we might govern ourselves. That was the American Revolution. Govern ourselves. Now, what's the revolution of today? What's its nature? Violence. Violence just for the sake of violence. That is ours. I mean, not ours. Please God, not any of ours. You or me. But I mean the new type of revolt, which involves the destruction of everything that is in the past. And these people who are actuating violence today claim they're in the line of the American Revolution. They are not. Now let me go more into detail. These two types of revolution. Each of these had a character at the head who symbolized the revolution. The one who best expressed the principles of the American Revolution was Thomas Jefferson. Thomas Jefferson is the antecedent of all Americans today who believe in self-government. Who's the progenitor of this kind of revolution? Someone who was a contemporary of Thomas Jefferson. Strange to say. Sanders. 1793 revolution. Sanders. And all were associated with him in that revolution. Now let me tell you the difference between the two. And here we'll have a review, really, in pietas and patriotism. And I will first of all describe what Jefferson taught us, what we believe, what are the conditions of the preservation of our country. Then I will give you Sanders, who holds exactly the same thing that the violent revolutionists of today hold in our country. They may not know that they are adopting his principles, but they are. Thomas Jefferson probably knew Sanders. They were in Paris together. But in order to do our American Constitution, Thomas Jefferson had to repudiate all of the principles of Sanders. Whether he knew Sanders or not. What wonderful work the angel does. Knows when to clean, when not to clean. Angel clean, he's known as, not as Mr. Clean. Let's review the principles upon which our democracy was founded, and let's review Sanders. Thomas Jefferson founded our democracy upon two principles. One, the dignity of man. Secondly, I will just simplify it, all rights and liberties come to us from God. I will explain these, and then we will go to Sanders. Without telling a word to my angel, he knows and knows very well that he shouldn't keep his word at this point. Thomas Jefferson. First, he believed that the government must be founded upon the respect for the individual. So he investigated what are the source of our rights and liberties. Where do they come from? Where does my right of free speech come from? Or the right of assembly, or any other right we have? From the will of the majority? If the will of the majority could take away the will of the minority. Jefferson intended that the majority would be the custodian of minority rights. The rights and liberties come from the federal government? Well, certainly not. If they came from the federal government could take them away. Taking almost everything else away. Just about take away our rights and liberties. But he set it down in the second paragraph of the Declaration of Independence. It is a self-evident principle. Self-evident. That the Creator, has endowed man with certain unalienable rights. Unalienable. They cannot be taken away. Among which are the right to life, to liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That is our democracy. Those are the two principles. And isn't it interesting that that particular government and those governments in the world that deny the existence of God are those that deny the existence of human rights? Now, let's go to Saint-Just. What is Saint-Just? Along with him, Royer. What was their principle? Their principle was that in order to make people pass through a certain door, there was only one way to do it. And that was the way of terror. Confiscation of property and the destruction of rights. Saint-Just also said a people can be taught to save themselves only by violence. And the path to the establishment of every government must be upon a pile of corpses. That was the thing that Jefferson had to fight against when he wrote the Declaration of Independence. He knew it wasn't anything new. I'm bringing it up now to remind you that we're going through exactly that same crisis now that Jefferson faced. That our country today has to choose once more between Jefferson and Saint-Just. Which are we going to choose? We're familiar enough with the principles of Jefferson. So I'm going to enumerate for you. It'll be easy to identify the new type of violence that's sweeping our country, our schools, our streets. And I'm going to describe three characteristics. The first characteristic of the new violence of our day is what we will call elitism. Now this word, I don't know whether it exists or not, but It's the only way that I can describe it. It's taken from the word elite. There used to be a virtuous elite, a core of heroes and saints that very much influenced any culture and democracy. The new elite practices what is called elitism. Namely, there is a dominant minority that makes a lot of noise and that uses violence to force its will upon others. The revolutionists without a program. They have no flag. They only know what they're against. They do not know what they're for. And taking some words out of Toynbee, they're made up of two groups. Toynbee said the first group was Conqueror. I would call one of the groups the man with the bullhorn. He's always the leader. You just watch in any violent group today that follows the principle of Sanchez, what's the man with the bullhorn? He's the leader of that revolt. Secondly, there are the hangmen. The kind of a rifle death, destroy poverty, burn homes, do anything to enforce their will. And then there are the lost souls, the group that just profit from violence. Confiscate property to be in on the violence. That's the first group. And 6 minutes and 7 seconds. So be patient. You don't have to wait about 6 minutes for a commercial. Second, mysticism. This is another new characteristic of the revolution. Mysticism is a term that belongs to religion. It doesn't belong actually in the field of politics, but it's been transposed to politics. Now, what was mysticism? Mysticism was it could best be expressed in the mysticism of John of the Cross. Dodo, Nada. In other words, God or nothing. Now you give yourself to God completely, or else you give nothing. This was spiritual mysticism. Political mysticism is, of course, there is no God. It's my will or nothing. This is what the elite insists upon. No alternative, no compromise. So they would make, in this mysticism, a tabula rasa. They would wipe the slate clean of anything that opposed it. And then after they destroyed life and property, they would ask for an amnesty and immunity. Good. This is not my term. You could very well accuse me of having invented it. I've often thought of giving a Padcaster on it, but the other day I went into the 10-volume history of Toynbee. Lo and behold, I found Toynbee saying that idea which has been in my mind, namely Satanism. Satanism is behind it too, and this is the third characteristic of it. The world is built on order. There's a plan. So scientists are able to discover the laws of the universe. And in discovering the laws of the universe, men find harmony. This harmony, order, had to come from somewhere. It came from God. What is the essence of Satanism? The essence of Satanism is the destruction of that order. The order of law, the order of morality, the order of religion, the order of ethics, anything that you please. This is Sanchez in our day. Read me fellow Americans, I tell you that before the flood, the book of Genesis we read, and in the days of Noah, there was violence on the earth. All of the violence that happens in our country is a fever drive. Read it. It points to a decay in our civilization. How are we going to get out of it? The reason I'm hesitating here is just because there's so many ideas that I have to choose in the few minutes that are left. Which one to do? I tell you one thing that we have to do. We have to realize maybe why the eagle is our national symbol. The eagle always builds its nest high in the mountain crevices. When the young are hatched, the eagle pushes its young over the nest. And they fly down to what to eagle's eyes must seem like sudden death. Just before the young eagle crashes, mother eagle swoops down from its nest, down to the abyss and catches the young, and then flies up into the sky, swoops around it again, and repeats the process till the bird has learned to fly. Moses saw that when he wrote, "As the eagle stirs among the young, so does God stir among the nations." Maybe God is stirring us, bringing us to the brink of danger, in order that we might begin to examine ourselves and restore Jefferson, the dignity of man, and the belief in God. Our nation is too full of those that are crying down. Down with the universities, down with schools, down with the churches, down with teachers, down with government, down with the police. Can you build anything down? You cannot. Certainly time in our nation to change our words. Let's begin now to use the word up. Up from all of this filth. Up from this violence. Up from this indifference of courts. Up to the hit battlements of eternity. Up to God. I've got enough more to tell you about this subject, but we have time. So just bye now. I'm going now.
Not me, that's for sure. So for some of you,
and this is the center of that. So one of the questions that I get a lot is,
there you go.
Dang, you turned them off.
Snap. I put this back down. Well, for some of you, this was a rerun 50 years ago. So, thoughts?
How did St. Jude become a saint?
No. See, this is someone wanted me to explain this before. He's not a saint. It's Saint Jude. It's a French. He's a French name. Like there was a woman actor. What was her name? What's her name?
Oh,
In the
St. James? Jill St. James?
Something like that. St. James or can't remember her name now. But then we got Peter and we got Father Pete St. George. Right? That's a name. That's just a name. It's not. They're not a saint. So he was a Frenchman. That's why he didn't say Saint Just. He says Saint Jude. This is a French name. A lot of French people have that as their prefect of their name. So it's not a saint.
Okay.
They wanted me to explain that before. I figured I'd address it afterwards. Good question. So what'd you think?
Amazing.
Scary that he knew all that.
Yeah.
And I was thinking if it was bad during his time in the 50s and 60s, man, what do we do today?
I think
McCarthyism would have been before that. And McCarthy was right. You know, they all dogged him because of his last name. But I have a McCarthyism too, and we're right.
I think that was from the late '60s because it was in color.
Could be.
I remember him a lot of his shows because my parents watched them in black and white. Sometime between the mid and the late '60s, they switched to color.
Yeah, I don't know what time he started. I think he started in the end of 50s. He was on for a little while, I think, a couple years, like 4 or 5 years.
And just a couple of days ago, there was one of the parties was talking about that we weren't obligated to listen to what was in the Declaration of Independence.
Well, one of the parties, he's saying one of the parties said that you're not obligated to listen to what's in the Declaration of Independence.
Right. In other words, that's what
I'm sure that was the Independence Party. I mean, that's the point. You know, we work within the time with the frames that we have. You know, we work within the Declaration of Independence. If not, you start your own country. Go somewhere else, start your own country. But you work within the framework of the founders, right? So I just thought it was interesting just because I was sitting there thinking, man, if he made comments about people trying to tear down governments and trying to tear down police, and I'm like, violence, I'm like, you know, it's a new era. But it shows that it's always been true. Time of Noah, the time of him, time of us, you know, things don't change. You know, revolution is always kind of in the air. It's what type of revolution do we look for?
And the common thread would be Satan.
Yeah, I mean, the common thing is Satan keeps on dividing. You know, that's what he wants. He wants destruction, disorder, the taking away of human dignity and the taking away of God. And I preached on this forever. You know, when you take away God, eventually man gets taken away. You know, because man becomes an object, a tool. You don't have to get treated with any dignity. Look at Russia in the USSR. Look at China. You know, people are just commodities because there's no God. You know, God ruins the picture for human dignity, right? So if we take out God, then we can do whatever we want with each other, right? And that's why even in the early beginnings of the abortion industry, they always claim it was flesh because if they acknowledge as a person, it meant it had a soul. And God gives it the soul. God creates it. But if it's just flesh, then man creates flesh. See what I'm saying? So just in the little ways that they identify things, it's always taking God out of the picture.
I don't know how pertinent it would be to this conversation, but in the 60s when we hit the riots, it wasn't for my husband's career, he's a firefighter, I wouldn't have known half of what's going on or what was going on in the city at that time as far as the riots go. Now today, the media has made itself the speaker for all the violence and the ugliness, but they're not bringing forth to the media the goodness that we see. And I find that more disturbing other than the fact that he's actually talking about today, I didn't even know it. But we have a media now, which I don't think they have that kind of support from the media for the ugliness.
Well, I mean, that's one reason why there's so much anxiety in our world today. Because you hear about something that happened in California and you lock your doors in your home in Cincinnati. You know, for the longest time, you didn't know what was going on. I mean, they had murderers, they had serial killers, they had all these things, right? Child abductions. But people lived in their neighborhoods. They just continued life, you know. But now you hear, you know, all these stories that goes on in the world, and all of a sudden we think that if it's going out in Oregon, then it has to be taking place, you know, in our neighborhood in Cincinnati. And so we have to not talk to our neighbors and, you know, lock our doors. And I mean, it just changes the mindset. If you think evil is always around us or violence is always around us, then it's almost a self-fulfilling prophecy that it will happen here. And that's what happens when you have media that's 24 hours a day that focuses on there. And for whatever reason, they've learned that people prefer, violence and disarray, disharmony when it comes to stories than stories of harmony and goodness, right? Because you don't hear 30 minutes on the news about all the good things that take place in the city, right? And say, oh, by the way, at the end, like there was a couple murders and a couple people got robbed. No, I mean it's the way that they present it. If they presented the good stories for half an hour, and then instead of the other way around, we'd have a whole different mindset. So we realize how much we allow media to affect our lives, whether we know it or not.
And in the world of today, terror is fear. That's what that's what the whole
It's fear.
permeated.
Terror is fear.
And we have to watch and keep our eyes on God as the final destination, because otherwise we become paralyzed with inaction, not able to do anything.
Yeah, I mean, the reason why the small minority, is effective is because the vast majority lay silent. If 100 people went and protest and 5,000 people went down there and said, get out of here, they wouldn't be protests anymore. And after a while, people would stop protesting. They come in with their, with their guns and their knives and their torches, and then 5,000 people come with their AK-47s and surround them and say, what the heck are you doing in my neighborhood? Get out. They got rid of those, they went down there and took out 100 people in these cities 2 or 3 times, and all of a sudden they would realize, we're not going to get anywhere. We might as well just play the game. Right? And so it's our lack that we allow, the few to do that. And he's right. And it happens in parishes too. The 80% of the people are just satisfied in the general, and then you get, the small percentage that complains about everything. And you just got to learn, I don't care about the small percent. I got to take care of the big. Right? But that's how it works. The screaming child gets your attention more than the 3 kids that are sitting on the couch, doing what they're supposed to, right? Instead of just removing the kid and we'll put you in a place where we can't hear you. I'll spend time with the 3 kids that are behaving. So we've learned that very early on in life.
A comment I made, again, about terror reminds me how, unfortunately, even the word terror has been redefined. I remember some number of years ago, after 9/11, reading an article about weapons of mass destruction. And if you would, basically the author said, if you would have asked somebody in the government or military, what does weapons of mass destruction mean? They would say nuclear weapons. Now, a pipeline is reported as a weapon of mass destruction.
Yeah, because I would think a weapon of mass destruction would be a nuclear bomb.
And therefore, there's terrorism out there.
Yeah.
For a pipeline. I don't want to be around a pipeline. That's not the issue. But there's a world of difference between what dropped in Hiroshima or many times more of that than a pipeline.
Yep.
Oh, and also from an environmental standpoint, talk about the media. I'm a retired environmental engineer. A lot of magazine articles will say, well, the start of the environmental movement happened because of the Cuyahoga River catching on fire. That's what started everybody. Interesting though, the actual caught fire, I think it was 1969. But that was, the Cuyahoga River caught fire many, many times before 1969. In fact, the 69 fire was relatively small compared to some back in the 60s, early 60s and 50s. The difference was A, TV cameras, and B, it got on the front of Time magazine. So now all of a sudden everybody knew that, even though it had been common occurrence in Cleveland for many, many years.
Any other comments, questions?
I got another question.
All right.
What was the red cape something of his garment that he had to wear? Or, he's a bishop? Or Do they have a choice of wearing that or not wearing that? I always think of red being a cardinal.
I don't think it was red. I think it was pink.
Oh, okay.
Bishops wear pink. Priests wear rose. Because I said men wear rose.
Okay.
No, real men wear rose. Bishops wear pink. Yeah, so that's what the colors signify a bishop. All right. I just thought it'd be a good topic. We're coming up on an election, and we realize, what are we fighting for? We're fighting to be self-governed, and and it's based on those inalienable rights that we get from God. And I preach it all the time. If we can determine if we allow the government to make laws on their own, then they can take they can change those laws. So if they give us certain rights that we have, and I'll just talk about just as simple as, the right to assemble and the right to worship. There's still places where the government is telling people how many people can go to a church, or the church is even open. There's some churches in the United States are not open. And I'm sitting thinking, isn't that clearly a violation between separation of church and state? And the point of the separation was not the church should be separated from the government, but the government was supposed to be separated from the church, meaning that the government was not allowed to tell a church how to worship, how to gather. But slowly we allow them to tell us these things, and it's like the frog in the boiling water. We allow them to tell us what kind of how to build our churches in code. That's not up to the government to tell us, because various churches have certain structures that they have to keep in place that aren't necessarily going to be suitable. And so slowly we allowed these things to happen over the last 20 or 30 years, particularly, so that now it's not a big deal. If you try to tell people tell the people that they were allowed to go to church in the 40s, even during the Spanish flu, churches are only closed for 3 months, and it wasn't that they stopped services per se. They took away the obligation, but the government didn't tell them they had to. That was the choice of the bishops. They couldn't, and if a bishop decided to stay open, the government wasn't going to start arresting people for showing up. 100 years difference, 100 years in time, but the same exact thing, and something that was worse then than it is today. And that thing only lasted 2 months and killed, 100 million people in the world at that point. And it's not even coming close, and it's lasting 8 months. So, we're is questioning, what's going to happen the next time something happens. The government, gives themselves permission to do it now. So it's up to us, really, to really, write to our senators and stuff like that. We got to make this clear. Go to the courts and says, if this is going to happen in 5 years from now, this is our rights. Please define accurately what the Constitution and the Bill of Rights gives us.
But don't you think it's because of ignorance? Because most people, they just don't know that.
Well, the problem is,
They're so ignorant of everything.
the problem is, there's one of the new catchphrases that is the greatest and first commandment in our country is safety. You can give any reason whatsoever for taking anybody's rights away for safety. Right? You ever been to an airport? People want to blow up a plane, they're going to blow up a plane. You're not going to stop them. Right? But what do? They inconvenience people constantly. The government gets larger as a result, right? Because they have to hire all these TSA agents, right? Right? And people are willing to do that. That used to be called a legal search and seizure. You had to have a probable reason to search someone. And simply buying a ticket is not a reasonable reason to do that. Before, it was a private industry. Private industries can do whatever they want. But now you have government officials searching you for simply buying a ticket. You might as well search. You might as well search someone who buys a candy bar at the store. I mean, there's no difference, right? But we allowed ourselves to give away our rights simply for the word safety. Now we're wearing masks because safety. Staying away 6 feet, not going to church, safety. Not doing this, safety. It's all safety. As long as we say safety, it's the blank word. Well, you can't come to church. You gotta let me come to church. We're doing it for safety. Oh, if that's the case, thank you. And what? Because that's what people, the reason why people don't come to church, safety. Like, there's a lot of dangerous places. You don't stop going to the store, do you? Right? I mean, most people, I'm not saying all people, because there are still people that, have legitimate reasons to do that. So I'm not giving a blanket statement. So I don't, you'll get phone calls and stuff, right? Be a father. But, most people who are living normal lives are still using excuses not to do certain things. Because I was watching some debate on like the Sunday liquor law yesterday, right? And the Congress guy, Ohio's Congress guy was like, yeah, our family hasn't been to church since March. I'm like, you're freaking going to this freaking thing and no one's going to send your kids to school? Like, it doesn't make any sense. Like, you're doing your normal business in many other places, because it's just an excuse because we realize, well, God doesn't care what we do, and that attitude has come because for the large part of society, we've gotten God out of the picture. So now it becomes my personal response rather than the community response to God, the people of Israel. So, I mean, we're in dangerous grounds because if we're going to keep ourselves from going to church, the government tells us we can't go to church, maybe next election they won't tell us we can't vote because of safety. I mean, they'll probably try to do that now, right? But I mean, that's the point, is where are we as the majority saying this is getting ridiculous? We're supposed to be governed by ourselves. We're supposed to be a self-governance. And you representatives aren't governing for the majority of the people. And part of the problem is we don't have good candidates. Not everybody wants to take that on. Right? But, yes.
Yeah. 2 points. One, earlier you were talking about church and state. In France, it's the opposite way. France, the state has the right to protect from the church. But in America, with Jefferson and the founders, they always had the opposite way, that we have to protect the churches from being controlled by the state.
Exactly. And that's who the St. Jude's Revolution, that's the French Revolution.
And the second
that's the principle of the French Revolution.
Second point, you were talking about, I don't know if you've heard of the Great Barrington Declaration. This was, if you watch Firing Line is really good. And Dr. Fauci was on there, and they were talking about the Great Barrington Resolution.
The Great Barrington Resolution?
Yes. It was about a bunch of scientists all got together and signed a letter and said, we're going about this all wrong, and we need to get the herd immunity up so that everybody, because you're going to be exposed to viruses all of your life. There's always going to be germs. You got to get the scientists. They wrote this letter. Dr. Fauci would say, well, of course he's on the opposite side. He says, no, you got to have the mask and everything. But you might want to check into that. The Great Barrington.
Yeah, I mean, back in March, it was like, if we just stay in and we close things down, this would be gone in 2 weeks. And I said at the beginning, and they even said everybody's going to get it eventually, right? That's what they said in March. I was watching the news. And I said to myself, well, it's airborne, so eventually everybody's going to get it. And everybody's like, it's not airborne. I'm like, then how are you going to get it?
Right.
Unless you're hugging everybody, which I do give free hugs during this time, which will end the day Corona ends. But it is airborne. And when things are airborne, you can't control it. That's why it didn't last 2 weeks in March. We're in October, and they're thinking that we're even going to get worse. And they're going to go to purple. Well, what's that going to mean for us when it's purple? Are we still going to have our churches open? Or you get to watch me online again?
Yeah, I mean, who remembers the day Kennedy died? Who remembers when Elvis died?
I remember Elvis.
Who remembers when they first heard that they couldn't go to church? That was more shocking to me than any news I'd ever experienced all my life. I could not believe that I heard that.
I don't remember where I was. I don't remember where I was when. No. When they said the churches wasn't, but I remember looking at an email. My brother saying is that his diocese was shutting down masses, and that was like that's like week before ours. And I thought to myself, I was sitting at the table with the other guys, and I thought, what? The craziest thing I ever heard. Yeah. Huh? Oh, then I got the memo, and I never thought I'd ever be a time when I can obviously I can understand when obligation, but not to even allow the church to be open for people to make their free choice. It's a risk. I mean, people die of accidents all the time. Someone told me someone died the other day.
You did a great job here.
Oh, thank you.
You did.
Thanks.
I mean, the way they carried that out, it was great.
I had a friend from another parish came here, I don't know if it was a wedding or a funeral, but she was amazed at how everything was roped off. And she even said, holy cow, who crocheted all those?
I know.
I don't know, but somebody was busy. But thank you.
That's all right. But again, it just reminds us that we got to speak up. We just can't let people speak. The people who we all say we disagree with all these people. These fractions, but we still allow these fractions to continue. And if more people stood up, then and we told our representatives, if you don't do what we're asking, we'll sign someone within our group to run, and we'll vote them in. And that's how it used to be. And we've lost that. The world seems to be run by the minority groups instead of the majority groups, and that's not good because no one's protections are protected. All right, so be our responsibility to love God with all your heart, mind, and soul, and love yourself and love your neighbor as yourself. Okay, in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Heavenly Father, we come today on this Sunday, the day of the resurrection, to give you praise and thanks for the many blessings you continue to give us, particularly all those inalienable rights, for the dignity of who we are as human persons. We ask that your people will stand up and fight for the dignity of life in peaceful ways, forceful ways, but peaceful, and in order to make sure that that more important than our rights being protected is that we acknowledge your glory and we make that public throughout the world. We ask this through Christ our Lord. Amen. The Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. All right. Thank you, everybody. Thanks for watching.
Thank you.